My name is Kirtana Banskota, and I'm the co-founder of the Nepal America International Film Festival, which is one of the 7 film festivals that have come together to create CoSAFF. The festivals in CoSAFF include the Sphere South Asian Film Festival, Chicago South Asian Film Festival, DC South Asian Film Festival, Mosaic International South Asian Film Festival, Nepal America International Film Festival, SAFF Montreal, Vancouver International South Asian Film Festival. We will be taking audience questions during this panel, so please send your questions to our panelists at www.slido.com using the event code 71872. The link is also in the description of this video below, so make sure to send us your questions. I'd love to now introduce our guest moderator for this panel, Shrihari Sathe. Shrihari Sathe is a New York-based director and producer. He most recently won the 2019 Film Independent Spirit Award, Producers Award. His credits as producer, co-producer include Jerome Henry McCree's Per Vertigo, Eliza Hickman's It Felt Like Love, and Beach Rats, Partho Sengupta's Sunrise, Arun Node, Afia Nathaniel's Dukhtar, Bassam Jerbawi's Screwdriver, Ritu Sareen and Tenzin Sonam's The Sweet Requiem, amongst others. Sathe's feature directorial debut, A Thousand Rupee Note, has received over 30 awards. His latest production, Paul Felton and Joe DiNardo's Slow Machine, premiered at 2020 International Film Festival, Rotterdam. He has received fellowships from the HFPA, PGA, Transatlantic Partners, IFP, Film Independent, and the Sundance Institute, to name a few. In 2016, Sathe received the Cine Reach Producer Award. He's an adjunct associate professor and senior production advisor at Columbia University's School of the Arts. Thank you so much, Shrihari, for moderating this panel for CoSAFF. Over to you.
Thanks, Kirtana. I'm excited to moderate the panel and get the conversation going, which is quite relevant to all independent filmmakers, not just of South Asian origin, but from anywhere in the world. So I'm happy to introduce our panelists. Shahana Dasgupta from Foxstar Studios. Shahana is a creative producer at Foxstar Studios in India, and she has been involved with big films like Nirja, Jolly LLB, Chapak, Dil Bechara, and Panga. We have Jason Sondhi from Short of the Week. Jason is one of the co-founders of Short of the Week, and previously he was the lead curator at Vimeo for almost half a decade. And finally, we have Puja Kohli from Film Karavan. Puja has had a multi-storied career as a film festival founder, content aggregator, distributor, and most recently with a lot of content creation. And one of her shows actually has been nominated for an international Emmy. So congratulations, Puja, and welcome to all of you.
Congratulations.
So to start with the panel, I guess I wanted to start with the theme or the topic. So what to each of you means distribution during a pandemic? All of you work in different industries within the entertainment business. So how do you, in your line of work, kind of deal with this on a day-to-day basis? So maybe we'll start with Puja and then Shahana and then Jason.
So I primarily have been working with just digital distribution from 2007 when we set up Film Karavan. 13 years ago, the whole world of distribution online was a pandemic. There was no bandwidth, there's nothing. And so if anybody says this is a bad time, I tell them, oh, we've seen worse. This is way better, at least for my world of distribution. That being said, I think everything moves slowly. People react very differently. And large companies where we're looking to sell the film mostly in this world don't have a plan ready when something like this happens. So I'd say in the last 6 months, it's been pretty difficult. A lot of festivals went online. which used to play a large role in the film selections. And I primarily distribute films on Netflix, Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, so SVOD, TVOD, the premium digital platforms. And while the TVOD is, in your control as a filmmaker, as a producer, the SVOD, you're always dependent on a platform making an offer. And it's been tricky because one of the main reasons the buying hasn't been the same is because platforms are expecting you to have a theatrical release, even for independent films. And we can come to that, full circle at the end if you want, or else it's pretty self-explanatory how unreal that scenario is, not just during a pandemic, but anytime for independent films. So I think the buying patterns have been changing drastically from our point of view. That being said, there are numerous options that have sprung up in terms of original content, in terms of development of content that people have been doing in this time, but specifically for distribution, which this panel is about, so I'll keep it to that. It's been very tricky.
Shahana?
Yeah, so I mean, our industry is at a standstill, right? We have feature films, it's theatrical. I mean, we have primarily a large theater going audience, and that's the culture. More than Hindi films, it's even the regional films, right? South films, it's religion. Going to the theater, watching a movie in the theater is religion. They don't understand other, they don't accept watching movies on smaller screens as much. So it's been tough. A lot of us had movies ready, or in the last stage of post-production, we had release dates decided, and suddenly you have this pandemic where the entire world's come to a standstill. So producers have had to take a hard call. So movies that were smaller, so movies like ours, we had 2 movies that released on Hotstar. We got lucky. Hotstar is it's part of our mother company. So, it becomes easier to just, tell them, okay, let's just take it straight to you. But other people have also made hard choices. Big movies like Gulabo Satabo with big directors have had to make the hard choice of, listen, let's not wait till things open up. Everything's uncertain. Let's just give it to a platform. Things are slightly different there. Platforms are willing to pay a big price for a movie coming straight to them, and the theatrical, the premiere, the film premiering on the platform. So there have been, Gulabo Satabo got sold at a pretty decent price to Amazon. So it's not been a complete loss. But then there are bigger movies. What do you do with big blockbusters like 83? There are other big star films. You can't sell those to an online platform. What do you do then? So they are waiting to see what will happen. From the 15th, we have theaters supposedly opening up. But again, you can't rely on footfalls coming in. It's only 50% capacity. So again, the big films cannot release then. So it's been tough. It's crazy. We still don't know when bigger films can release. We don't know if we can ever re-release a film and make the kind of money it would have made if theaters were open. It's just a wait and watch game right now. And therefore, people are a little reluctant planning bigger films also. Because you don't know when you're going to be able to make that money of a theatrical release. So yes, the digital platform, all our digital platforms are a great way to at least distribute the smaller to medium level films, but the big films are still kind of in a limbo right now.
And Jason, so in your space, so you primarily work in the short form content space. So how has this time period, the last 6 to 8 months, affected the distribution of short films?
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting and maybe a bit frustrating to some of my fellow panelists. But working with shorts, which at least in the United States, there is no theatrical opportunity, where with festivals, they're an important part of the film's life cycle, but ultimately, short of the week we deal with online releases, it's very much been business as usual. And in fact, our submissions from March to say May were about 3x the normal volume. As we were seeing disruptions with festivals, there was suddenly a huge demand from filmmakers to work to try to release their films online, either because they had a festival run that was curtailed because of shutdowns, or because they decided to bypass festivals altogether. And we've always tried to break down this barrier between a festival run and an online release, and to promote and to advise filmmakers to view those kind of separate, don't treat them like separate distribution windows, try to treat them symbiotically. And I think there's been a large uptake in that message over these few months, as there's just been a lot of uncertainty about our festival is going to come back online or not. So that's where we're at right now, and business and kind of moving almost, again, I almost ashamed to say it, almost normally.
So to take off from that, Jason, you mentioned there was an uptick in submission. So can you talk a little bit about your selection process and what the curators are looking for as they try to decide what film ends up on Short of the Week, and how do you navigate that along with festivals that allow films to be online as well? But in this new normal, a lot of the festivals are also doing virtual festivals. So how do you as a platform kind of help work with the filmmakers in windowing as to when you would launch the film on Short of the Week versus them having sort of a simultaneous virtual festival run for the film?
Sure. So, our ethos at Short of the Week has always been filmmaker first, filmmaker friendly. And so to that extent, it's a very important part of, just our internal code, that we try to be as flexible and honor filmmaker wishes to whatever extent is possible. So we do not ask for any exclusivity. We don't ask for premieres. So in regards to what we look for, though, it's the same as it's kind of always been, which is, our values are that short films are, in some sense, an experimental medium. Because you do not have a lot of money involved, and you don't have a lot of hope for financial recompense, it also provides a lot of freedom. And so we love to see short filmmakers working to hone their voice, to tell new types of stories in new types of ways. That's what gets us the most excited. Now, that can be formal innovation in terms of story structure or topic or style or medium of how you're telling it. We feature a lot of animation. We were early in featuring a lot of XR work, but that also is in topics. So sometimes you can tell familiar stories, but then they're recontextualized by who is telling the story and who is being depicted on screen. And that's a form of innovation that we celebrate too. So we're looking for those things. And I think increasingly as COVID goes along, we're also having to reassess and reconsider certain snobby things that I think as programmers, we sometimes have created as a shorthand to recognize things like cinematography, like production design. There's so many more limitations around storytelling just because of the difficulty and the inability of people to come together to create work. We're having to shed some of those preconceived notions and evaluate work even more strongly upon core values like writing, like direction, and find the interesting and valuable storytelling efforts that are being made with more limited means. And to that extent, we created a project back in April called Shelter Shorts with a couple of filmmakers, Lance Oppenheim and Max McGillivray, which was a sidebar to Short of the Week proper, where we created a community and a collection of where quarantine specifically quarantine shorts could live, films that were made in the place that you were sheltering only with the people you were sheltering with. And that ended up being a big hit. We got something like 500 films that were created and submitted through that endeavor. And that was a deeply rewarding experience. Not to ramble too long, but you did ask about festivals, how we're working with them. Much the same way as we always have. We don't believe in exclusivity. We don't believe in premieres. And so we've always had films coming online at the end or in the middle of festival runs. And it's kind of the same way as usual. I think filmmakers are realizing that in some sense, all film releases and all distribution avenues at their disposal right now are online though. And so to the extent that we have a deep experience, 13 years now running in promoting, packaging, presenting films in an online space, whereas offline festivals are now having to learn a lot of this stuff for the first time, it has made coming to Short of the Week and submitting to us more enticing.
Great. So, I mean, to go a little bit further on in that space, when the film does go on Short of the Week, how long does it stay on the platform? And do you geo-block it if the short film has maybe distribution in some other country through one of the traditional distributors or home video distributors? And is there any revenue share, if at all, for the filmmakers based on views or a flat fee, or do you help with primarily getting reviews promoted for the short once it premieres on your platform?
Yeah, so historically, online releases were considered the tail end of your distribution strategy for your short. You went to festivals, you tried to get terrestrial, tape, TV or satellite or train distribution, all that kind of stuff that was paid. And then when you ran out of all those options, then you put it online so that it could be seen by a wider audience for free. And now more people are rethinking the order or the prioritization of those things. People are recognizing that even with paid opportunities, it's maybe a handful of shorts worldwide a year that even recoup their film budgets. Nobody's really turning a profit. And so they are prioritizing the aspects of their film that are, it's something of a dirty word, but a calling card, an advertisement for their storytelling sensibilities and their abilities. And they're recognizing that online, because it's stripped of the friction of having a decision maker have to be physically at a festival and be physically at your screening at the time that you're playing, that online, because it's frictionless, because it can spread in serendipitous ways, is actually your primary release when it comes to attracting potentially a collaborator, a producer's interest, or a development executive's interest, a agent or manager. And so we work with filmmakers to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve with their short. What is the number one thing they hope to get out of this in terms of moving their career forward? And we help facilitate that. So, our Short of the Week platform has hundreds of executives from a lot of, at xxx.com companies that you would definitely recognize who are constantly looking for new talent. And I'd say the average film that's featured on the site is receiving somewhere between 5 and 15 general inquiries for meetings over the course of the next week. Most of the films on our platform still, once they go online, they stay online in perpetuity. There's no rule about that. So if you say that you want to be on Short of the Week for 2 months, 3 months, we honor that. And then as regards to revenue sharing, the goal is to not put a wall, to not put any sort of friction between you and your audience or industry that might be involved. So we never want to put a paywall, but we have started hosting more and more films on our own Short of the Week YouTube channel, which we've gotten up to about 360,000 subscribers over the course of a year and a half. And we are turning on rev sharing for select high performers. So that's a relatively new initiative. It's only been going for a couple of months, but we've already seen 1 or 2 filmmakers, including an Indian filmmaker who's due to be making, you know, $500,000 over the course of this sort of advertising rev share model through YouTube.
So you mean to say 500 to 1,000, not $500,000, right? I'm just clarifying.
500 to 1,000. Yes, that's an important distinction to make.
Okay. Great. So, I mean, I think to take off that cue, the idea of more traffic going online. So Pooja, I mean, you, through Film Karavan, you put both studio films and independent films online through the aggregation channels. So what sort of uptick are you seeing in that space? I mean, I think a lot of our audience is primarily going to be from the independent film space. So I want to focus more on that instead of the studio side. Like, because the theatrical releases are pretty much appended across the world. It's not just the US, it's not just India or South Asia. Everywhere theaters were shut down, completely shut down for months. Now they're starting to open up, as Shahana mentioned, in a few weeks, India will start opening. We saw China open up a little earlier. A few months ago, we saw Europe starting to open up. Some theaters in America are opening up. But how long does the independent filmmaker wait for a possible theatrical, or do they just dive deep into saying, hey, I want to get my film out there? And what does that look like for a filmmaker right now?
So I'll start by talking in a language that the platforms talk. Because when we say independent, I don't think it translates very much to that world that we have to sell content to. So let's talk in their language and let's see what all you can check off on your film. And if you can, then you'll know where you sit in a bucket of whether you have any hope right now or you have to just keep waiting. Platforms that are looking to buy content, and we've been doing this for the longest time. I mean, we started, you know, aggregation with Yash Raj and Dharma and Excel and all the large films. We sold Bahubali and Saho. But because of our roots of where we came from, you know, running the IAC and everything, our entire goal was to get the independent films a platform. And trust me, my first release online was a Sita Sings the Blues, which, you know, should have been the best commercial choice, but it was the best, you know, curatorial choice. And that is what we've always striven to. When the platforms were launching all over the world, including India, there was this desire to put together a package of independent films, which we did. Everything from an Amal to a Loins of Punjab. We went back like 20 years. Patang, just everything, you know, Amu, all these amazing filmmakers that today are making big studio films, their first indie films. And they were very successful. The platforms loved it. What happened is in the months and years to follow, there was no usage on them on those platforms. The audiences that they were getting in these countries, specifically, let's talk about India for a minute, since we're talking about independent content, which at least I specialize in for the Indian market and the Indian filmmakers. People were still watching Sultan over an Amal on Amazon. People were still watching 100x of a Bahubali, which they should, over anything else that we gave to a Netflix. The numbers don't lie to them. Their models get run on that. And very soon, the demand for those amazing, beautiful, independent films just truncated. They went down even before the pandemic hit. Now, in this given time period, the way the films, there's a couple of things that have happened. We've sold a film that we produced independent called What Are the Odds? And we released it on Netflix. There has been a film that I've been associated with, JL50, which has Abhay Deol, which just got sold to Sony Live, broken up into 6 parts or 5 parts as a show. it was a film. Tesh is going live, Bijoy's film, on Z5 very soon, which is going to be available as a film and as a show. So just from this, you can see very clearly. And for us also, for what are the odds, we completely went down a rabbit hole for a while to break it into chapters and do 4 episodes. We had chapters in the film, they lend itself to the film. But the reality of the matter is that people are now excited about shows. They're coming and saying, okay, what's the new web show? Because that's something they're not thinking they'll ever be seeing in a theater. So it's okay, it's the normal. People are not ready to watch a big film, like Shahana said. Even like a Gulaba Sitabo would probably have done better in theaters because the audiences who would have come to see it in a theater aligned with what that material was. So what's happening is you're making something, and like we always say to every filmmaker, know your audience. Where is your audience? Why are you making it? Even in the world of digital platforms, you have a Hotstar, you have a Sony Live, you have a Z5, you have a Netflix, you have an Amazon, you have a Disney, you have, well, the Disney here, not the Hotstar Disney, which will soon be probably one. And know your audience. Where does your content fit? That's the first thing. You know, if you think your film is slightly similar, because I know every filmmaker thinks they're the first original, beautiful, best idea, but where does it sit? Is it English language? It is probably not going to go to Hotstar or Z5. If it's a regional language, it's perfectly aligned for a platform that has large regional audiences like a Hotstar and a Z5. If it is a Hindi language but has any recognizable face, so if you look at any of these Netflix original films, which were not necessarily commissioned and made as original films, they were acquired and released as original films, they fit a particular criteria. They had recognizable faces or a recognizable director or a entertaining film, you know, masala, something that is easy to watch, something that is, consumed in a large number on their platforms. So if you have a film, and you could, as an independent film, have a film that could meet any of these criteria, you could probably get away with a straight to digital as a film or broken up into a episodic format with any of these platforms. That's just something. Also remember that everything that they commissioned the platforms as episodic shows is on standby. Nothing got shot, nothing got finished. And so they have calendars which had items which are not going to get delivered anytime soon. So they're absolutely looking for content that they can bring to their audiences. They're not trying to shun you away and say, I don't want your film, but do you have the material that they're looking for? That's the first question. The second question is, if not, the second thing that used to be exciting was a big festival, name or a brand associated with a film that might not have a Nawaz or an Abhay, or might not have, entertaining masala content. So yes, the festivals did make a difference. Every year they would look at the Sundance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, Toronto, Cannes, Venice, Rome, all of that. And that came with something that was appealing for these platforms to have on their service. I think with a lot of platforms going sort of, I wouldn't say off, but soft, there is not enough publicity, there's not enough sort of the buzz that you got at the festivals that made it exciting. And I have a lot of filmmakers who've made some amazing films. They couldn't attend those festivals. They have it that they were selected, but there's a halt. There's no movement because it's almost like it didn't happen. Also because avenues have been blocked. And then the third option is that no matter what your film is, if you plan a theatrical, because that's just a check off of getting in, when you have to apply to a school, you have to say, yes, 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 I've done all these things. It's literally that. It's a check off to say, have you done a theatrical? And it's like a moot point because, and we've all learned, especially for independent films, it doesn't work. My second film that we released online, Superman of Malegaon, we were excited enough to do a theatrical in New York. I remember Pulkit was there part of those days, you know, helping us get the word out. I don't think it made more than $2,000 in its run. We all know it cost a lot more. And that was probably the last time, you know, I have believed that a theatrical is necessary for an independent film to reach its audiences. Definitely not now, you know, 12 years later. So I think these are the three areas you have to review and revise, like how you present your film. Sometimes that is important. Now, let's say you have a fabulous film that was in a festival, but it doesn't have a recognizable face or a star. Can you have a recognizable face or a star present it? You know, that's taken the film a long way, because with our film, you know, first time filmmaker, Megha Ramaswamy, first time, you know, young, beautiful, amazing talent with Karanveer and Yashaswini, but only because Abhay Deol was a producer on it, and he was able to pull not just the PR and the marketing machinery around, only in a way that somebody like his caliber can. The fact he was attached to a project made it relevant for a lot of people to see why it was something that could go forward. So I think these are some of the ways in which you can package, you can present the same film to platforms to see if that can go forward right now.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of great points. I mean, one of my fights against sort of boxing of films for the last many years has been the differentiation between Hindi films and what is known as regional films.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to say, they're not regional films. They're just films that are not in the Hindi language. So I think it is a conversation that filmmakers and producers and people in position like yourself or others need to start changing in order that these films in Tamil, Marathi, Bengali are not clubbed as a regional film. They are just not in Hindi language. They're still global. They're still pan-India. There are people who speak those, understand those languages in different parts of the world. So I feel it is very important that filmmakers themselves, when they're pitching their film, don't pigeonhole themselves into a box by primarily saying that. And I do want to drive that a little bit, because the only way the narrative will change is when a collective of people start addressing that we are not just a regional film. We are a film that's in Marathi language. It's not a Marathi film or a Bengali film or a Tamil film. And I think it's very important to have that conversation as you're getting ready to market and pitch your film. The idea that you mentioned about the lack of views for films on platforms for the indie films in the first few years, I noticed that with a lot of my colleagues whose films were on Netflix and on Amazon, and they were there for 2 years or 3 years, but they didn't get renewed. But that slowly started changing a little bit during the pandemic, because due to the sort of the lack of content in some ways, but primarily because of the eyeballs on screens while people were sheltered at home. Just to give you an example, two of my own films, Duktar and 1,000 Rupee Note, for about 2.5 weeks were trending on Netflix and popular on Netflix worldwide. And for me, that was a huge surprise. And I was like, how the hell people discovered my film? And it was because people were just spending a lot more time at home. And in certain countries, Netflix had my film versus a lot of other content, perhaps. So more people were watching it, which fed into other people watching it, which was kind of turned into a cyclical way. So I feel like the platforms, as you mentioned, are kind of coming to a bind where their shows have gotten stopped. So it seems like this is a perfect opportunity for independent filmmakers who have made films maybe in the last year or year and a half that were waiting for their festival premiere. If they align with the platform's vision, as you mentioned, a perfect time for them to approach someone like you at Film Karavan or a distributor who has an output deal with one of these platforms to get that film out there, because this is a good time to get them seen.
Absolutely.
So I think going from a little bit from distribution to sort of content creation. So Shahana, since you are a producer and you work in a major studio, in India, what is sort of the conversation at this moment? Are you seeing writers and directors adapting the stories that they're creating, developing at this moment in 2020 to the current distribution models available for them? Or are people just saying we want to work in the same mode and we'll see what happens?
I think different people are working in different ways. So there are people who, I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of directors across India because our idea was that, we need to start exploring talent from every industry, like you said, different languages, right? And there are directors from Malayalam cinema, Telugu cinema, who've actually made full-fledged feature films during the pandemic. They've gone out and shot proper feature films during the pandemic, and they are actually marketing them now. So those are guys who not let anything stop them. They have gone out and made a proper theatrical film. It's not an amateur product. It's a proper product. There are others who are trying to keep it small because, of course, there's a cash crunch. You don't know when the economy is going to bounce back. You can't shoot really big things right now because, I mean, one person infected on the set, you can't shoot again. So there are people who are concentrating on smaller stories. And again, this pandemic has opened people's eyes to doing stuff straight for digital now. Now your biggest production houses, Dharma has a digital arm, Excel has a digital arm. All of them have digital arms. Red Chillies has a digital arm that is primarily looking for content for digital platforms. Those guys are really active because, like she said, every platform is looking for content, and they are trying to find content that is easy to churn out, fast turnovers, quicker to finish on time. There are people who are of the opinion that this pandemic has also kind of changed the film viewing habits of people. At least in the Hindi belt, there will be people who will be reluctant to go to the theaters for smaller films now. I mean, they already were earlier. It's going to get only worse now. You're not going to shell out 2,000 rupees or 4,000 rupees to take your family to watch a smaller film. So therefore, there are some directors who are only making spectacle cinema. So you already have a couple of really big films that have been announced. And those guys are willing to wait because anyway, the films are going to take 2 years of pre-production and then shoot. They're willing to wait for that time. So I think it's a personal choice. But the producers who were kind of dismissing the digital platform, so to speak, and said, oh, it'll never affect how cinema going audiences will behave, are now taking their words back. So now everyone's trying to get on that bandwagon. You have the biggest directors doing stuff for digital cinema, for digital platforms. All the biggest directors have their shows there. So I think it depends on what you want as producer. For us, Disney and Fox have believed in big spectacle cinema, so that's the route we would take. But I know there are other producers who are putting together smaller stuff, which they'll decide whether it makes sense to have a theatrical release or release it directly to digital platforms. So I think it's both. But when it comes to Tamil, Telugu, they're making their big films. They're making all kinds of films, and this has not stopped them. They've started shoots, they're releasing these films right, left, and center because they know that their theatrical audience is going to stay the same. Those guys are going to come and watch their films regardless of anything else. So their filmmaking, their content creation, that hasn't changed.
So I think, in terms of, let's just use an example of Dil Bechara, right? So right. Dil Bechara would have, under normal circumstances, been a theatrical release. So how did you, Foxstar Studios as a company, adapt your audience messaging and driving the audience that would have typically gone to the cinema to the digital platform, Hotstar? I'm not sure if the film was available worldwide or if it was available only in India. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how the messaging switched from a marketing and distribution point of view from your end.
So releasing Dil Bechara on digital was a learning curve for all of us. None of us had released a film straight to digital. So even the post, everything changed. So what we did marketing-wise, of course, Dil Bechara is it's a one-off. The tragedy that happened with us losing our lead actor, that gave it a big momentum. So we didn't really have to do that much. I mean, because there was already this audience sympathy, there was this emotion towards the project. For us, it was literally just putting the assets out. We followed our film marketing to the, I mean, we would, this is how we would have promoted it if we were releasing it in theaters. We said, we are not going to step back. We're not going to make it small. The point was, whether it's theatrical or not, this film is a big film for us. This is a film that we put in a lot of effort into. So we had the theatrical, we had more assets than we would in a theatrical release. So we had multiple songs going out. We had multiple small teasers going out, dialogue promos going out. We use a lot of influencers to kind of seed in the marketing on social media. So we had influencers creating content to promote the film. We had A.R. Rahman. Rahman went all out to do like an online musical tribute with all his singers to promote the film. But like I said, Dil Bechara had a lot going for it, unfortunately, because of what happened. On Loot Case, which was a small film, first-time director, ensemble, small cast. I mean, it's got Kunal Khemu, Rasika Duggal, Gajraj Rao, Vijay Raz. That's a small film. I mean, we wanted to be a theatrical release. It got pushed once, and then we had to put it on Hotstar. There, we literally used a lot of small dialogue promos. We created a lot of memes. We went complete social media style. Literally, we had an agency that literally started creating content that was very social media designed, which we would have never done otherwise. We would have not gone out to create memes to introduce the characters. We did a lot of we created little skits with the actors. So the actors did online skits to promote the film, to activate their fans on social media. So that's what we did. We didn't do so much TV. Generally, when it's a theatrical film, you spend a lot on TV and promotions there. We didn't do any of that. So literally all our money spends were on social media to promote the films and to get the traction there.
So I think to kind of go from there, as you mentioned, so A.R. Rahman created this concert and helped promote the film that he was a part of. So Pooja, you had also mentioned a little bit earlier about the idea of presenter, as someone who is championing your film. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how does one go about attaching someone to their film in order to be able to present the film. What kind of doors it will open, both in terms of distribution, but also in terms of generating press for the film. And then Jason, for you, I just read recently that you have brought on board some big celebrity directors as investors in your company. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about how that is going to help build up the profile for some of the most viewed shorts on your platform. So let's first focus on the features, then we'll dive into the short conversation a little bit.
I think each film is different. Each filmmaker's journey is different. You have, if you look back on your path, come across people who believe in your work, who have supported your work genuinely without any asks or takes or gives. You have to make a list of those people, and they could be anybody. They could be actors, they could be directors, they could be producers, they could be somebody who has one of three things. Either they're respected for their choice of filmmaking. So again, talent of some kind who you resonate with when you make content. Be somebody who has the ability to bring in press awareness. They're on social, they have a following. That doesn't mean everybody writes to Salman Khan to come on board to present his film. It's just not going to happen. But trust me, you make a story about street kids and giving them hope, he might just come on board because he's very, very close to that subject. So that's the second one. You have your influencer, not necessarily talent. The first one is talent and aligned talent. And I can tell you exactly how each one can take you forward. And the third one is somebody who can actually sell your film. Monetization. So there are companies like Shahana mentioned who have output deals, whether it's aggregators like us, whether it's producers like Dharma and Excel. There's lots of companies who have the ability to package your film or present your film to a platform in a manner that might be better. So these are the three things. So you have your talent backer, you have your social media or your marketing backer, or you have your complete business backer. This is exactly what you need to get from where you are right now to the next step, wherever that may be. And in a way, you need all three. The first one you need is a deal. You need a sale before somebody, but a talent will be able to do the same thing. And so make a list, write to them, send them the link to your film, tell them why you want them to be attached. Make it sort of important for them to see the value of something like this. Somebody like Abhay has always been a huge supporter of independent films. Right from the beginning, I remember we were asked by Amazon to put together a package of independent films, and everything from A Labor of Love to A Kagaz Ki Kashti, he actually curated a pack of films that he liked out of all the submissions that we had. And then we sold that, and they were all like, branded with Abhay Deol Presents. There was, marketing and press that came along with it. And it really helped Amazon, filmmakers, everybody. I mean, till date, everybody laughed. They're like, does Abhay Deol understand Kagaz Ki Kashti, Jagjit Singh documentary? We're like, yes, he does. He loved the film. You don't have to relate to every subject. You have to relate to the product. And there are people like that out there who will come on board to support you. Talk to your other filmmaker friends who have successfully been able to release their films, monetize their films. There's lots of smaller platforms. If you go non-exclusive, it's very long tail, but yes, you will have made the money back if that's what you want, or reached a larger audience than you're reaching right now. It's literally, you have to have your plan A, B, C, D. Just, you can't give up because of how the world is, because it's always been tough. If you think you're going through a really tough time right now, I think the only thing I can tell you is it's never been easy for anyone, especially if you're an independent filmmaker. Doesn't matter what festival you went to, doesn't matter who your producer was, doesn't matter how amazing your film was. It has been difficult. It's been an uphill battle, and it probably will be. So just embrace it and keep fighting. That's the only way you can come to the top.
Yeah, so Pooja, since you mentioned the exclusivity and non-exclusivity, maybe you can talk a little bit more about what that exactly means, and what is a filmmaker giving up when an SVOD platform says, OTT platform says, we want an exclusive for this number of years. What are they giving up exactly?
Different kind of deals and offers will come with different caveats. If they're buying it as an original film, let's say, and that's your best case scenario, quite honestly, at this point, if you think about it, because of the monetization and the marketing that you can get for your film. But when you sell a film that you have produced, directed, made, created as an original, they take everything, including IP, for perpetuity. You get your money and that's it. So there's nothing else. There's no second thing. And that's like a Delhi crime. Like, you'll never see that anywhere ever, because we've sold it. Well, no, sorry, I'll take that back. That's not, but anyways. So that's
for episodic, it's a little different. So in since we're focusing on features. Yeah.
Yes, and Delhi Crime's a licensed show. So, and that's the second part. You can license your film for X number of years. So whether it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, it will be on that platform. When it comes to Netflix and Amazon, they are 100% going to buy an exclusive SVOD, which means they might have a window which bars you from doing anything else if they want to have an exclusive SVOD window when the film is only available on their platform. But beyond that, you can go and exploit all your other markets. So whether it's TVOD, whether it's satellite, airline, music, everything opens up in a licensed way. But in that way, it's not branded as an original. It's just one of the films that goes on the platform. They will market, but to the normal degree of everything that they license. if at all you are able to do a non-exclusive with a larger platform, you absolutely will take that offer as an offer as well, because if that's the only thing you have, the monies are less, but then it gives you the ability to really go, you know, the old school way, how you had a sales agent and sell your territories. You can literally create a list of 40 different platforms where you can sell and monetize your film. And the beautiful thing about that is it might take you a year to do that, but you will be actually on the most watched platform in a territory that will be promoting it to their market, to their audiences. And it's a beautiful way to sort of, it's like mini sort of releases all over, and you might have different windows of release. You'll be able to promote it in different territories. It's a lot of work. I don't know if it's worth everyone's while to do that. Most people would want to make one sale to a Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar, Z, and say, okay, I'm done. It's live all over the world, 190 million, blah, and done. And they should go make the next film, you know, quite honestly. So we do a part of that. We handle each film differently. There are films where we have sold to a platform as a pre-sale for a theatrical release. So there is a condition that when the world opens up and theaters are thriving, you will have to do a theatrical release. And we've kind of agreed to that because it makes no sense. The film at this point has been live on a platform for how many months? There's absolutely no way it's going to do well in a theater.
Right.
But if that's the price to pay to agree to have your film go live right now, then yes, it's a great option. And similarly, you can come up with X number of ways to figure out whether it's an exclusive deal that makes sense for you, whether it's non-exclusive. The final thing, which I'm not usually in favor of, but I'll just throw it out there because some people might be in a crunch to just have to make their money back. It's not the best way to do it, but there are companies which will buy out your film from you. And then they'll package it with maybe catalogs that they have or other things that they do for maybe a 500 film list that they own. But that's pretty much like, you know, giving your film to a pawn shop and forgetting about it.
Right.
And
it's kind of like a library sale, essentially. It's not a targeted sale approach. It's more about, hey, I have 500 movies. I'm licensing these 500 movies to 10 platforms. Every film gets $5 or $10 or whatever it is from that pot. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not an ideal, but a film that's maybe 10 years old that never saw the light of day, maybe they'll see the $10 and they'll be happy with that, you know? So moving on to Jason. One of your backers is Kari Fukunaga, and you have other directors as well. Is that helping any of the filmmakers specifically that have maybe some of these celebrity directors and producers saw the film on your platform and they were like, hey, I want to get behind this filmmaker? Has that happened yet?
We have done we got a great press release out of it, and Carrie and David Gordon Green are both investors, have been great in terms of being a sounding board for us and certain ideas that we want to kick out. You know, in conjunction with them coming on board alongside Michael Sugar, who's an Oscar-winning producer, produced Spotlight. It's also responsible for things like True Detective. It's been really a great opportunity for us to learn from them and to get our foot into the door. Michael negotiated for us our first look deal with Netflix for film and television. And the idea is yes, we want to try to create a pipeline from 5,000 submitted shorts to Short of the Week every year, 10,000 total shorts viewed by our team every single year, and try to create like an actual funnel that can provide direct and meaningful access to development opportunities that could result in a Netflix show or a Netflix film. So we just inaugurated that right at the beginning of this year, and the pandemic has thrown a little bit of a monkey wrench in there as everybody's trying to find their footing about where things are in terms of production, in terms of longer scale strategies. But I think it's a really promising start. No, we have not, necessarily introduced a filmmaker to Carrie or David yet who want to like take them under their wing. But we have a lot of those kind of similar success stories that have happened over the course of the years. We have a recent one just now, which is there was a short film called Pocket that we played on Short of the Week, probably spring of last year. And it was very novel. It told a teenage boy's story entirely through his interactions with his phone. So it's a vertical orientation film. It's all about Instagram and text messages, and you're able to tell a very sort of coherent and cohesive story through that. That caught the eye of Steven Soderbergh, who saw it on Short of the Week and reached out to Zach, the filmmaker, and said, "Hey, I think you're onto something." And they were able to quickly develop a new script for something that ended up becoming a show called Wireless that was sold to Quibi, and that just came onto Quibi maybe 3 weeks ago. And Steven Soderbergh applied his name as an executive producer, and that got it a lot of press. Over here in America, Quibi's been running commercials for this show Wireless during the NBA finals. That's not cheap. So that's great exposure for this filmmaker who, again, literally 1 year ago had produced and self-financed like what was ultimately an experimental short, and now a commercial for his newest project is playing during the NBA finals. So that's fantastic. And that is kind of a proof of concept for our model of saying, look, don't get too much into the weeds about what festival you're getting into, how you can try to recoup money off your shorts. There is not a robust market for shorts. The important thing is trying to do the best you can to get it seen, because you don't know what sort of, again, serendipitous connection can arise from that sheer act of putting it out into the world as simply as possible and as expansively as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I must say that like Short of the Week is a great resource for a lot of filmmakers in terms of looking at what is out there. I mean, personally, I've used your website for my classes when I'm teaching writing the short screenplays or short filmmaking classes, and I use the website to find films that I feel might be aligned with some of my students, and I feel like that's a really great resource for independent filmmakers who are seeking inspiration to work on their own materials, to look at what other filmmakers are doing. So I think this is a good way to explore that. There's a couple of questions. We're going to dive into some audience questions. There's a question from Arshad. The digital age removed the monopoly of big studios and empowered independent creators. Does COVID-19 offer a similar opportunity for content creators? I think it's both features and shorts, so maybe one of you can take kind of a stab at it.
I think the pandemic has definitely opened audiences to newer type of content, for sure. I suddenly have friends who are willing to watch films in all languages, read subtitles when they would have never done that before, except for maybe an international film. And now they are consuming content from all over the world across. I mean, I have a friend who's addicted to Korean drama. And it's only happened during this pandemic. I have friends who are watching edgier content on digital, and when I say edgier, Indian content on digital, which they wouldn't have otherwise because they have Stranger Things to watch, or they have. So yes, I think it is a good time for younger filmmakers to kind of put out new content out there. The digital platforms do offer that. I mean, whenever we get scripts from young directors, if we don't think we can do justice to it, the first thing we ask them is, are you willing to make it for digital platforms? And if they are, we connect them with people who do that, only because, I mean, think about it. They can put stuff on digital platforms without any censoring. They can make the film they want to make. They don't have the pressure of having it perform or not perform, and that having reflect on their name. I mean, the next time they make a film. So the digital world has definitely opened up, I feel, opened up the audiences. I mean, they've started accepting newer content. I mean, I would have never thought before this time, I would have never thought people would appreciate a show like Patal Lok. I don't know whether y'all have seen it. Patal Lok is this edgy show. It's about the caste system. It's about discrimination. It's violent. It's graphic. And the number of people who've enjoyed it, I don't think those people would have watched it otherwise. But because they're stuck right now in this pandemic, they are watching that sort of content. They're talking about it. So people have started, I mean, if you're on WhatsApp groups, you will be like, okay, what is the next show to watch? Is there a film I should watch? A small film like Ye Ballet is literally a film about two young slum kids who learn ballet in India, and two young boys. And it got so much, I mean, there were so many people talking about it. And if they weren't sitting at home, I don't think they would have been watching these films for sure. So I do think that this has opened up the audiences a bit. And I think the digital is a great way for young directors to get discovered, to put their content out there. I mean, like Pooja said, it is tough. It is difficult to kind of get your work out there. But if once you do, there are people who do notice your work. There are people who do. I mean, we look at a digital content to look at the next director, someone we want to, kind of give an opportunity to. We reach out to those directors and say, listen, do you have something that you want to develop that, we can work on together? And that's great. We're not limited to just, working with a certain section of directors, so to speak.
Right. I think one of the things that kind of helped during just maybe pre-pandemic was Parasite winning multiple Oscars. I think it opened, at least in North America, a lot of audiences or encouraged them to watch subtitled movies. And I think that has had a trickle down sort of effect on films from India or Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, even like East Asian films, to get a little bit more visibility. I'm not saying it's a night and day difference, but yeah, sure, some of these films are getting watched a little bit more because, as Bong Joon-ho said, people maybe are starting to get over that 2-inch barrier in some ways.
And sorry, just to add to that, I mean, Parasite has been an eye-opener for all of us. Now, suddenly we are like, okay, maybe there is some of our content that can transcend the what we assume are cultural barriers, right? So what kind of global cinema can you make? I mean, I think our choices for the films that go from India for the Oscars have not always been the best. But I mean, think about it. If a Parasite can do what it did, some of your films like Court, some of your Malayalam films, some of these films can really make a mark on the international scene. So I think directors are now feeling a little brave after Parasite, because they're suddenly like, okay, it's not hopeless. We can think like that. I mean, there is an opportunity there.
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe it's just my sort of contrarian nature, but I was gonna maybe play devil's advocate and throw a little bit of a wet blanket on the question, which is, this pandemic has felt like a decade to so many of us, and yet it still hasn't been that much time. I think that the hypothesis of the question is that absent sort of major producers, there would be a vacuum, and that people would need to diversify their tastes to supplement, their media habit. But, I haven't seen that much of a slowdown in new Netflix shows, new Amazon shows. A lot of these things are being produced far in advance. And, Netflix came out and said that they have pretty much their entire 2021 slate is, they're not going to be shuffling up the schedule at all, because they already have most of it in the can. So I'm a little bit skeptical until we start to really see that lag in the rhythm of new releases from established entities, whether or not we're going to really create that space in which there'll be a rush of new and edgier and independent content to kind of fill that void. And the other thing that's a little bit slightly alarming to me as well is that I think that this pandemic has had, as many people have talked about, it's had serious mental health repercussions. And I'm sensing from the audience that I'm communicating with through my website, through to just my circle of friends, that there's been, you know, a little bit of a retreat, that it's getting harder to take a chance on a new show or a new film, and that a lot of more people's media diets have been sort of sliding back towards, you know, familiar comfort food, watching, you know, old sitcoms for the 5th or 6th time, you know, just wanting this, that sort of sense of familiarity and normalcy in what they're watching and consuming. So, you know, if I'm going to be a skeptic towards the premise of the question, that would be points that I would bring up.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you bring up, because I mean, I noticed myself kind of doing something similar. I rewatched The Sopranos, the entire series, again for the 3rd time, because it was something familiar to me, and I wanted to relive the memory of enjoying that show for the first time. And it was something that gave me comfort in terms of consuming content while sheltering in place. The follow-up, a question for Jason from Mira. I have 2 shorts that are 5+ years old that I never sent to festivals. Could these still be considered for short of the week? And is there any scope for older films for online distribution or any other distribution?
We don't have age requirements for our films, so it's definitely eligible to be submitted to short of the week. We just care about great films, you know. So if they're 10 years, they're 20 years old, like, doesn't really matter. Sure, there's certain like tastes and trends in terms of production that, you know, what our audience expects that we're going to be wise to. But absolutely, you could still submit them. And regarding whether or not older films have a path, you know, I think it's one of the interesting things about shorts is that they don't necessarily age in the same way that, you know, more established television or film productions do. It's the downside and the upside of the space, which is because there's no advanced marketing for any of these films, because there's no real ecosystem to educate a fan base around them. Every single film is taken at face value. It's basically brand new. So, you know, if somebody had been waited with bated breath to see your film 5 years ago, they might have moved on. But if there's no time like the present, the minute that you start to put it out in the world and try to get people excited about it, it's going to be the first time that they've ever encountered it, and they have no preconceived notions about it or about its age. And so therefore that ceases to really be a limiting factor. It ultimately is just about, does this film work? Is it great? Is it going, do audiences connect with it?
So because of the pandemic sort of uncertainties, are there recommendations for independent filmmakers, primarily maybe, let's say, feature filmmakers, for budgeting smartly, or what to sort of expect, or tailoring their film specifically for digital platforms? Pooja, you're on mute.
Yes. Picking up from the last question and then coming to this, I think, yes, the pandemic is horrible and it's bad in every way, but I have to say that if you look at that tiny ray of hope, focus on that, because this has been the best time to write and develop stuff without any distractions, travel, meetings, the way they used to be. And I know a lot of filmmakers have been able to channel that time and energy. There hasn't been a better time for writing, in my opinion, if everything around you is healthy and safe. That and being able to wait and see what happens with a ready film that you have is the most wise thing to do right now while you keep pushing. But if you've tried everything, that doesn't mean you give up. As you can see, Jason is still looking at, ageless films here as long as they're good. I remember, Amal was something I told Richie Mehta in 2007. I promise I'll distribute it. And we did it on Amazon, Netflix, almost 8 years later. So that doesn't mean that there is no hope, and it's going on. It's getting renewed now. And because of that conversation, the show came up that he was working on. And it's going to be a long cycle. Just because you've made a film and just because it's ready does not mean the timeline of that is over. That being said, what was the second question?
It was about should filmmakers be budgeting smartly or tailoring their project to specifically for this moment towards digital distribution?
So I think that's a very, very important question that not only like the pandemic has only like put a spotlight on this, but more than ever, if in the last 3 years you have not been thinking about what your project is, in terms of what if this was going to be, like Shahana said, you see a script and you know it's not going to work. Why do you think platforms are asking us when we present a film if it's going to be in theaters? It's not because they have a mandate that they can only buy films that go to theaters. It's because they're trying to ensure that this is a project that will have the ability to attract larger numbers. That's it. So when you're writing today, if you thought, and yes, not everybody's making court and not everybody's making, a film specifically for a niche audience, but that was what an independent filmmaker wanted to do. They took pride in saying, I'm making it for my festival audience. And then if it gets accepted and, celebrated, it can go wherever it's going. But within those festivals, and all of us who've been part of festivals for as many years know that there are films that, are a treat. And then there are films that are serious and need that time and patience to absorb, to do it. And there's a very, very, very small percentage of people who want to watch the courts. And I'm really sorry, but after having been a part of, not just IAAC, but IFP for so long, the people who are watching court want to be seen watching court. I'm sorry, I'm going to say this loud and clear. If you're showing me court online, I'm not watching it because nobody can see me. I can't discuss it and have wine and cheese and say, oh my God, can you believe it? This is so amazing, life transforming. No, everybody wants to watch Loins of Punjab. They want to laugh, they want to crack up, they want to see a Hank and Asha. They want to see, fun films. And there have been fun independent films, even with a serious undertone. There's always been a message. But those films, I'm very happy to press play sitting at home alone because I don't owe this to somebody to be at a place where I am conditioned or asked to enjoy something which is out of my taste, maybe. Or just be a purist and make your films, but don't expect them to be sold or make money. Make them for what you believe in. And that's totally fine and fair too.
So, the pandemic has kind of initiated this new window now in the release strategy, the virtual theatrical window. The other straight to digital or other home video windows are collapsing now. We've seen AMC and Universal Studios do a deal for shrinking the window to, I think, 45 days for when the films can be available online or on VOD. And now for the independent film space, maybe one of the things that have sort of kept films going is the virtual theatrical window, which is very similar to the traditional theatrical, but it's just that it's done through the theaters online. Do you feel that there could be any resistance from aggregation platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, or even SWAT platforms for extending this virtual theatrical window beyond the pandemic?
Yes and no. For the films that they want, they will think of this as a problem and they'll want them not to have appeared on it. To some extent, some platforms might reject your title because it went online. But for many platforms and films where the films are still being shown virtually online, not as a theatrical virtual, but as a festival virtual release for a screening or for a week, it's not a problem because that's still accepted because it's a non-commercial release as a part of a festival, which only adds value for them. Theatrical has never been a problem. And as long as you're going through a channel where you're sure and secure about this release, it's not getting pirated, it's not getting to a point where it's going to affect the monetization of that platform's release, it's not going to matter. In many cases, they might not even know about it. And
Right.
that's fine. You can announce it if you want, but the problem with announcement of the fact that you've done a virtual theatrical will come the ask of knowing the box office. And I don't know if you want to go into that whole conversation, because if you say $2,000, then that's a pass from the platform.
Right, but I think one of the things that virtual theatrical has sort of ensured is reviews, which the platforms want. They want that buzz. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Is if the film does get positive reviews, it's beneficial for the platforms. But if the film gets bad box office and doesn't really get any reviews, then the filmmakers kind of relegated themselves to not being able to get those platforms anymore.
But the thing is, then you're letting go of the opportunity to sell it as an original, because
Right,
they
of
want
course.
the reviews to happen when they release the film. They want it to be, branded as an Amazon original or Netflix original, and get the, reviews and critics to chime in the minute, the time it goes live on the platform. If they've already reviewed it before, that's not going to happen again, and that's a loss too. So
right. I mean, I think the virtual theatrical kind of comes into play when you have a traditional distributor on board, which helps drive that publicity and marketing machine that might have output deals with Netflix or Amazon, or are able to sell a limited number of their titles to these platforms. So there is sort of a pipeline to end up digitally, but self-releasing is something that I think every filmmaker should kind of question. What are they going to lose if they do end up doing that? So Jason, a question for you. So with the current distribution rules sort of changing, primarily in the long form content space, do you feel that studios and platforms will start taking a better look at short filmmakers and create further opportunities? Maybe Shahana can speak to that a little bit as well.
I think it's a good question, and I have to think about it a little bit. I don't feel like I haven't perceived a profound shift. I think this is a shift that's been under talked about for going on 5-6 years, which is that, talent discovery and talent championing has undergone already a big shift through online distribution, through the ease in which there's many different media to discover, that there's more creators who are reaching audiences independently of established companies and established modes. And that's all been attractive. I think people who are looking for new talent like to be seen by their peers, by their coworkers, as being adventurous and of good taste. And you're starting to see development deals around podcasts. You're starting to see Instagram emerge as like a huge recruiting tool in animation. I think this is just sort of an inflection point for what's already been an existing trend, which is that creators are able to cultivate awareness and audiences through digital tools in ways that they couldn't a decade ago. And I think that the smart executives and industry folk have been on top of that, and they're going to continue to be on top of that, because more than anything else, they just want to find great original voices, and they still believe that that is the path to ultimately creating compelling content, is to find and champion those voices.
Right. And Shahana, so how is that? How is this going to maybe open some doors in the sort of the Indian studio system in some ways for more talent to get noticed?
So, I mean, and Pooja can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like the short film format in India, at least, has suddenly started getting noticed a lot more. Now you have digital platforms are releasing these films. So therefore you have these directors who have found a way to get their work published. I know people who are using social media to publish their films. So for us, again, like we are looking at new talent on the digital platform, from the digital platforms, now suddenly short films have become another place for us to look, like he said, look for new voices, new storytelling, new directors, new writers, because that was something that wasn't really available on a I mean, it wasn't really easily available. I mean, you could go to a Mami, you could go to a film festival and watch short films, but now you can literally watch short films on a Netflix and Amazon. I think Hotstar started getting in a few short films. Now, young directors are just publishing them on Vimeo. They're putting them on online on social media. So I think it does open, I mean, for us, it does open a new avenue to, at least in India, a new avenue to kind of identifying new talent to see where they will go.
Right. So I think maybe Jason, can you talk a little bit about sort of this new partnership that you've Short of the Week and CoSAFF has formed in terms of the films that are in the festival this year? How are they going to get presented through Short of the Week and positioning? And is this something that you will be exploring with other festivals in the future, primarily during the pandemic when everything is happening online?
Yeah, no, this was a great opportunity that CoSAFF brought to Short of the Week, and just brainstorming about ways that they can provide more value to the filmmakers that are participating in the festival. And so what we did is we just decided that every programmed film, short film in the festival would automatically be eligible for Short of the Week consideration. And this allows the filmmakers to bypass our paid submission process and just be directly considered for inclusion on our platform. This is something they opt into. So if they are not interested, they can let that be known that they're not interested. But it's a great opportunity for them to get on our radar and save a little bit of money. And this is the first time that we've done it. I think we will do it again for future festivals. But I'm just an admirer of CoSAFF. It was one of my hypotheses at the beginning of the pandemic, was that this is going to be really tough for film festivals. And I think there has been a little bit of bloat in the film festival space. There's probably too many film festivals that don't mean enough beyond their specific geography. And I think it's smart to kind of join forces with similar festivals and create something, pool your resources, create something that's a little bit bigger, it's better, that makes a bigger splash through partnership and cooperation.
Right. So I guess a question for all of you: are sales agents still relevant in the new normal, with most feature films either being originated by SWAT and digital platforms, or being acquired right as soon as they premiere at a festival, or sometimes even before? And can sales agents help with short films? So in your case, Jason, are you actively engaged with sales agents who are sending you short films in order to use your platform as a publicity tool, or to help maybe generate some revenue through your YouTube channel maybe? So maybe first Pooja and Shahana can chime in a little bit, and then we can have Jason speak to the short side.
You want me to start?
Yeah, you can start.
The answer is no. I don't think they're relevant at this time. Things might change again. They were very relevant 10 years ago. And the last 10 years, I feel filmmakers have been empowered to take things in their hand and move forward with so many options, so many opportunities. And I personally feel that when you've made something and you have the ability to take it forward, that's the best way. You should talk to the sales agents. You should absolutely figure out what that plan means for your film. It might be great. I think especially if you have a film that has the potential to do better outside India than in India, that's a great way to go. And also to, get into all those territories, it's much tougher. But if your film is primarily going to work for an Indian audience, and if your film's major source of revenue is going to be from digital, then I don't think sales agent is the right way to go to break up those territories, because everybody today wants global rights. And if you start breaking that up, you're going to lose your digital sale. I've had nightmare situations where we had to sell a film where I had to go to 3 different sales agents of different territories, 3 different sales agents to buy back the digital rights that were just lying there, because nobody could sell just that piece and then combine them together to make a global sale. I don't agree with that model anymore. Also, if you are a filmmaker based out of India who primarily, let's say in Europe, wants to release a film in different territories theatrically, yes, definitely, that's the way to go. But as of right now, if you're looking at a digital avenue, sales agents, not, in my opinion, the best way forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. I have similar feelings as well. Jason, so to kind of wrap up this question, what's your take with sales agents for short films, and are you working with them on a frequent or infrequent basis?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a complicated question, and the whole space regarding short film sales is very much in flux and changing quite rapidly. I think sales agents for a long time had somewhat of an antagonistic relationship to Short of the Week. We didn't feel too strongly one way or the other, but I think we were very much at the forefront of kind of disrupting their business model by creating this marketplace for shorts online, creating this audience for shorts online, and suddenly their filmmakers were eager to participate in that, and that was problematic for their business. They used to be selling individual territories for 10 years at a time, these very restricted deals for very low money, and that has slowly gotten whittled away, and slowly, and then now very fast. But on the other hand, there are definite advantages to going with a sales agent. If you have one of those kind of premier short films that could play a lot of the European festivals, they're very well entrenched there. If you are in a country which has a lot of governmental support, a lot of grant support from various organizations, sometimes getting those festival laurels is very important for your ability to receive money for a new project, for that first feature film, say.
Right.
And sales agents, they know that space, they know the film festivals. Having them attached to your film is a great signal to those film festivals that they should program the film. So that is one potential upside. And they do make money for the films as well. I think it's slowly going away, but there are television opportunities still in Europe and Asia for shorts. And they've been diversifying into, transportation sales. And then there is a new emerging digital sales space too for, online distribution through magazines and other sort of platforms that has started to emerge. Our general advice has always been, though, that the money that you can make off your short does not make up for the restrictions that come with it, that it's sort of a balancing effect, and that ultimately you should do your best to maintain your optionality, and if you can find a sales agent who will not ask for exclusivity, that won't give you a lengthy term, sure, go for it. But try to protect those rights to the extent as possible, because again, it's our belief that your short film's upside financially is capped at a very, very low level. And that ultimately the biggest advantage that you have with your short is getting it seen by people who can help move your career forward. And you should probably try to get to that quicker rather than later. Yet, you know, I say all that, but increasingly over the last year or two, we've started to have quite good relationships with distributors. After giving us kind of the cold shoulder for several years, they are now increasingly solicitous of our attention. They want to get on our YouTube. They want to do rev share there.
Right.
Increasingly, they also want our help come award season. So even though Oscars has a deal with Shorts International and Magnolia for a theatrical tour in the States and through various transactional VOD deals throughout the world, getting an online release through a platform like Short of the Week has become almost an essential stopping point for short films that are on the Academy shortlist, to try to build awareness amongst the voting bodies to try to move that on to the next stage. And a lot of those films are repped by sales reps.
Right.
And we work closely with them to help facilitate that kind of exposure and publicity during that time of year.
Great. So last question to wrap up our conversation. What is the last independent film that you watched and you were kind of blown away by it? Maybe we'll start with Shahana, Jason, and then Pooja.
It's an independent short film. I just watched yesterday, actually. It's a director who sent it to me. Very interesting. He made it years ago. Vikram Gupta, he made it years ago. It had Rajkumar Rao at that time, who was a nobody. And he just sent it to me. Very interesting film. It's going to get a release now. It's all about, very relevant today. It's all about how the other side's always, how you always misunderstand the other side, and how that's how wars begin, or that's how fights begin. And it was very interesting because it was done literally through few characters in the small room, and it was just so hard hitting. I think it's also because of what's going on around us and all of that, that it really, I mean, I think you consume content. I mean, it's so subjective, right? It affects you in different ways with what's going on around you. And this really hit me because it was so relevant to what we're going through today in our lives with everything going on around us.
What's the title?
It's Vikram Gupta's I Will Check and Let You Know. I have it on, I'll tell you. It's
Okay.
Vikram Gupta's film.
Okay, Jason?
I mean, someone else can.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I don't want to say a short because I don't want to be favoritist to any of our beloved Short of the Week films that are coming out. So I will say a feature. I adored Palm Springs, which came out which was premiered at Sundance this year and is now, in the States at least, available for streaming on Hulu. The filmmaker is, I guess this is a Short of the Week favoritism because he's an alum of Short of the Week. He had a short that was on the platform maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But it's fantastic, and it's a great comedy, incredibly well written, and it's the type of sort of mainstream accessible independent film that I haven't seen too much of in the last 3 or 4 years. I feel like there's a lot of people that are still trying to create those kind of mainstream accessible, crowd-pleasing films independently, but it nailed it to the best extent of anything I've probably seen in like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it during the pandemic as well, and it actually surprised me. And I was really, I found it very enjoyable, and it's kind of a modern day Groundhog's Day in some ways. And I felt that the voice was something very fresh, and it's something that I wanted during the pandemic was to laugh, you know. And I think the film really delivered on that.
And you know,
Yep.
completely by accident, thematically, it's a very good pandemic film because it reflects what so many of us are living with, the kind of monotony and repetition of days and the lack of variety and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, sorry. So the thing is Us Din by Vikram Gupta. Us Din.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Pooja?
My days, now that I'm home with my boys, usually are spent watching Mulan and Dr. Dolittle, which is really how every evening is. But in the time that I get to spend on work, I think two films recently struck me. One was Idam Parveen Bilal's film that was in South by Southwest this year, which unfortunately also got cancelled due to the pandemic, which is called I'll Meet You There. Very important film, I think, given the times that we're in, with everything that's going around. I think it was very well done. And it was kind of the film that can travel the world. It's the film that I was talking about, like you could look at a sales agent coming and taking this to different territories. Um, well done film. I loved it when after watching Doolittle. It was a good break.
Yeah.
The second one is actually very interesting. It's a film called The Last Color, which our friend Vikas Khanna, the chef, the Michelin star chef, who you all might know, has made as his first directorial debut. So apart from cooking, amazing food, he's now cooking up stories. And it stars Neena Gupta. It's sort of on the lines of Water, the widow based in Varanasi, and comes across this little girl who kind of transforms her life. I thought it was interesting for both of these films because they're coming from two people who are very passionate about telling a story that, that's very close to their heart. You can see that, and that's the truth that sometimes I try to look for apart from all the technical things. And it was interesting watching, these two things.
Great. So all of you, please check out these recommendations, and I hope that all of you got something out of the conversation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, Shahana, Pooja,